Good morning. I'm Kyler Cheatham at The Confluential, and I am your solo host today. We're talking about agents today, specifically the agents we work with, and I'm actually going to show you one here in a bit. So before I get into that, if you're new here, this is The Confluential Live, where we kind of have an informal conversation about real things that we're seeing in the marketplace when it comes to overall enterprise technology, what hype we're seeing, and what actual systems are going to get you real ROI. And a lot of that noise, right, has been around AI agents. So I'm going to actually show you a real AI agent in action today. So, with that, I just want to go through a few things logistically. I can see all of your comments, no matter where they're coming in from. I see them on YouTube. I see them on LinkedIn. I see them on Instagram. If you're coming over from our TikTok lives on Tuesdays and Thursdays, welcome. Hopefully, we can spice it up so that YouTube and LinkedIn aren't so boring, and have a good conversation about AI agents and how they can actually keep you in a situation where you're being more productive. So I invite you to put your questions in the comments. And as I always say, right, it doesn't matter what I say. It matters what you're actually going to experience in your organization. And a lot of that comes through just understanding a lot of strategies. In my software advocacy work, I talk a lot about, how big consulting and big SaaS in general profits off your confusion. With the AI hybrid pricing, this is so incredibly important that you own and operate your own agents. A lot of talk has been around the SaaS apocalypse, right? It's become like this weird term that first Salesforce brought up, and now it's something that we've seen, SaaS drop in just overall value in the marketplace. And so we've seen, especially bigger SaaS systems, Salesforce, Oracle, SAP, all of those different tier one systems now wrap useless agents into their core offering and take advantage of the pricing in that. So we've seen AI tax, we understand what that means. Now, hybrid pricing when it comes to tokens, usage, output. You need a PhD to figure out how much Copilot costs. And that's why I want to show you what a real boring predictive agent in this conversation goes. So happy Friday, everybody, and let's get into it. So the first thing I want to really explain to you is what is an AI agent. It has been this overhyped, overused terminology, and there's really a variety of different types of agents. So take Copilot, for example, that I just mentioned. That is a collaborative agent, right? It helps you do things like read emails, organize your inbox, do a variety of different things. It's more of a co-working collaborative agent. Those agents are often run off of somebody else's platform, whether you're talking about Copilot, whether you're talking about a variety of different tier one agents, right? That's going to help your team work better and faster, allegedly, right? And then it's also going to give you an opportunity to be more ingrained into a tier one ecosystem, right? So Microsoft now sells Copilot, or Copilot is in all of its different packages in which it sells, right? It's never going to be $18 a month. That's just a marketing ploy, right? You're going to have to make sure all of your different license levels are going to be appropriate for the Copilot usage that you need, right? That's an example of a collaborative agent. And then we have a generative agent, which would be something like a ChatGPT, Perplexity, or something like that. And it's an agent that's going to generate content, right? Whether it's going to write your emails, whether it's going to, write speeches, write demo scripts, which if any of you use it to write demo scripts, we're going to have a problem, right? But it can be used to kind of generate those types of talking points. So that is always going to be something that typically either scrapes a data set to bring and organize information. Even on a lot of business intelligence tools, they have a generative agent that's going to help you find and put together dashboards and reports, right? Really helpful on that level, right? And then we have predictive agents, which is more our agent classification that we build here at the Confluential, but also more of the agent that's going to be on your manufacturing floor, your shop floor. And they're going to really help you through your own forecasted data, right? So the data that you put into it from your organization, and this agent is going to oversee certain processes. And I'm going to show you our Catapult agent here in just a few minutes when I kind of explain the point of that. Now, the predictive agent is only going to be as good as the data that you put into it and the operators that oversee it. So these agents will hallucinate all the time, right? They also will not be able to pick up on certain things. You're going to need to monitor drifts, all of those, and they should be the most boring part of your processes. So let's get into some of these questions before I go into the demo, because I really want to deeply make sure that you understand what an AI agent is. So when your clueless executive is coming in from the board being like, we need agentic AI to be, efficient and profitable in the company of the future, you can be like, cool, but like, do you even know what that means? Right. That's the goal in this conversation. So do you think most companies are ready for AI agents from a data perspective? Absolutely not, right? I think it's going to be a journey. And a lot of times, AI agents are sold as a silver bullet. And the issue with that is really the pricing, right? So the more that you use your agent, learn about it, embed it in the workflow, kind of get it learned and tailored to your processes, the more expensive it is. If you ever use Claude, right, and you reach the output limit, right, because that's how these things are priced, that's a huge problem. So I even say spend a year on data, right? Get your data in a place where it's going to be a strong foundation that your agent can absolutely use and read. Don't parallel path those two, because then you're just throwing your money off the roof. So very good, good, good question. Jeez. Is it Friday morning? Is it Friday morning, right? Let's see. I like this one too. How many tasks should an agent carry out? Because this is often so misunderstood. So great question, Avery. Is one agent per each task. So a lot of times people see these agent platforms as just one agent. That couldn't be further from the truth, right? You have an agent that measures temperature. Then you have an agent that records temperature. You have an agent that then makes the decision to change the temperature, to lower the heating component or turn on the cooling component, whatever, right? So that those are big pieces that are misunderstood when it comes to agent. One agent per task. And you have to manage all of these different agents, right? So a lot of times when we're thinking about we're going to cut headcount to put in AI agents, can you do that? For sure, you can do that. But know that they're going to mess up and screw up and they're like a junior employee that you need to actually train and oversee, right? A lot of times I say, no offense to our interns in any way, shape, or form, but an intern is a lot of times more work than they are output. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't invest our time in them, because that's the future of our company. But the agents are the same way, right? They're going to be a lot more time and work because you got to oversee them, right? So great question. Let's see. Is the SaaS apocalypse real? Um, I don't know, right? I really am not into anything that Mark Benioff says in general. I'm sure he's not into anything I say either, right? I think for SaaS apocalypse, what you should take from that is watch your billing, watch your pricing, right? They're feeling the squeeze, and that's going to pass to their users. And so you need to be vigilant about contracts you're signing and agents that you're absolutely implementing. And remember that just because a vendor comes to you and is like, hey, we now have agent force all in our CRM, that's not a flex, right? You should hear dollar signs coming out of your ear, being like, okay, well, what agent do I actually need and what agent do I actually use? Or are you just putting all these in here because you want to charge me more for an agent I never asked for as a business? So that's what I want you to remember when it comes to SaaS apocalypse. Who cares what, the rich people in Seattle say about that? I think he'll be fine. I guarantee you that. So, let's see. One more before I kind of get into more of like what the catapult is and give you the demo. With agents, you have to define what success looks like for it to work, whereas traditional software it either works or it doesn't. Such a good point. Um, Avery, that is an excellent point. And you have to just define like success is a lot of times a range, right? So when we do a make me agenda for a status meeting, it's not going to be the perfect agenda, right? So we might tweak it, copy and paste it, and be like, hey, this is what my final agenda was like, so that we can make sure that the component is learning from that, right? This is what I want for next time. So the outputs can get better and you can get more efficient and faster and all of these different things. Or if you have a team platform, right, they can learn from what, the head project manager, right? Um, Shows. So these are such good questions. Yeah. So what AI agent predictions do you think are completely unrealistic? I think when we get into the level of like autonomous agents, that's wild to me, right? You'd have to be that's an agent just runs, right? Nobody touches it. It just goes and goes and goes and goes. And it's a completely autonomous process. So no people are involved in that. That's wildly unrealistic, incredibly risky, right? And I think that's what a lot of people are thinking, and that is not at all how these work. So I would love if we could be a bit more grounded in the narrative around them. So, and then this is one that I think is very important to specifically what we're going to talk about with the catapult, because when does it make sense to build versus buy a tool? And that's what we see a lot of times with predictive agents. Especially for the industries we serve here at the Confluential, we're a specialized firm in heavy industry, so mining, metals, biopharma, all of these different pieces that are very complex manufacturing, food and beverage, those types of different areas. And a lot of times, the data those need in heavily regulated industries are much, much more sophisticated than someone that's making something else, right? Especially when we're looking at things like aerospace and defense, again, food and beverage. We see that traceability needs to be something that is incredibly sophisticated. So we need to know if someone got listeria in Pennsylvania, right? What farm did that come from in Europe? And more importantly, what crop and when was that harvested, so that we can trace back to if someone, got sick from a piece of lettuce. Same thing with aluminum, right? If there's, God forbid, some issue with a plane compliance or Department of Defense, we need to be able to look back at like what exactly happened from the moment that manufacturing piece started. And that's not last year, that might be 30 years ago, right? So we need to have all of those data. So when we build a tool, that is not only giving us that, but it's more secure. A lot of times, our heavily regulated industries can't just have Copilot running around all of their different things because they need a certain level of security clearance for their systems, right? We just saw this with CMMC, where we're going up to level 3 as opposed to level 1, or all of these different things for aerospace and defense when it comes to the security clearance of their systems. That's where the predictive agents come into this manufacturing process. Is these agents, so the Catapult is built on your system, not on Azure, not on ChatGPT, not on any of those different things. It's built for you, and it only runs locally, right? There's no additional platform that you need as far as these bigger cloud software pieces that are not within a security clearance. So that's when you need to build your tool. I think you should build your tool at all times because it gets your internal competencies in house, For agents, am I telling you to build an ERP system? No, I am not, right? So don't come for me in that conversation. So I do think that you should learn how to build and manage your own agents so that you don't have to pay those wild subscription fees and you're at the mercy of somebody else's business when Salesforce just feels like they're going to change the prices, right? So so with that, let's talk a little bit about the catapult and how it works and why we essentially named it that. And I'll just remind you that this is just an example, right, of what can be done. Every person or every client or business that leverages the catapult does something different about it because it's not about what we want it to do, right? It's about what it actually is going to produce value in your organization. Um, so let's talk a little bit about what it looks like from a predictive agent standpoint. So really, the Catapult is an agent that's designed to help manufacturers keep the production process really stable from a statistics standpoint, right? We're talking about forecasting data. We're talking about historic data. It monitors certain inputs and it tracks variations from those historical production data patterns, and it helps the operators distinguish between what's normal variation and true process drift. So think about, a production manager that's been on the line for 30 years and he constantly is like, he knows the hum of the machine. He's like, yeah, that'll be okay. That'll fix itself. That type of thing. Instead of a newer production manager that might stop the process, shut the production line down, rightfully so, right? Because they think that there's an issue with the production process. So instead of manually chasing that process through trial and error, right, which is expensive, costs us downtime, the catapult, right, then analyzes patterns continuously and recommends data driven adjustments for things like scrap, downtime, overcorrection, all of those different excess waste. So it takes kind of that tribal knowledge through actual data, right? Doesn't read your mind. A lot of people have said that, which is wild, but it accelerates the decision making and helps manufacturers keep the process in control longer. And this can sometimes be hard to explain because everybody has different manufacturing processes and things like that. So, what happens in that process is something I'm going to show you here in a minute. But why did we name it the catapult? Well, a catapult, if you kind of know what that means, is a system in which you pull back, right, the catapult and it shoots rocks across that. So the name of it is a really simple concept for a technical piece. It's got small adjustments when we look at angle, tension, force, right? This is a very sophisticated demo. This is not the demo. I'm actually going to show you the system. So it's going to be more than a green Sharpie. So hold on with me here for a minute. So any slight change in that is going to make the output go in a different direction. There's also variations like wind, weather, all of those different things that go into this type of thing. So just like an operator tuning a catapult to shoot where you want it to shoot, the manufacturers are constantly trying to hit the same target over and over and over when it comes to temperature, which is going to be the conversation I show you today, with as little variation as possible, knowing that there's going to be some level of variation. It is not going to hit the same temperature every single time. That is unrealistic. And so the agent represents kind of the intelligence behind the catapult and behind that process. It it takes the physics of the system, right? Tracks every shot and then helps operators understand whether they need to adjust or they don't need to adjust. And the name kind of reflects that in that. You have questions on it, definitely drop it in the comments or DM me and be like, can it do this? Right. So it's built for whatever process it's going on. So let's see. I'll answer some of these questions about the catapult and then show it to you. You guys are like, please just show me. What problem was the catapult originally designed to solve? I think the problem is the emotional operator, not because that operator is ridiculous or anything like that, but a lot of times in these types of high stakes manufacturing processes, we can't unmelt metal, right? So in those manufacturing pieces, we need to make sure that we're sure. And a lot of times operators will be more risk adverse, as they should, right? But not knowing that this has worked before, or this variation is normal. And that is kind of what it was designed to solve, to reduce waste and be a bit more efficient on that side. So let's see. How does the catapult learn or improve over time? So that comes from the data set, right? That it's pulling and learning as it goes to see which variation, especially in the adjustments, because the operator will have to adjust it. Like I say, these are not going to be perfect every single time. I think that's the problem, is they're sold as this like magic. It's absolutely not magic. It takes work to make sure that it's configured correctly, and it takes those adjustments and it learns from them moving forward, as well. So with that, let's kind of show you the catapult. While I do this, right, there is a level at which I can see your questions. So definitely make sure that they're in here. Let me see if I can make this a bit. No, no. No, that wasn't it. Let's see if we can make it a bit bigger. No, we don't want me bigger. We want me smaller. There we go. All right. So can you see it? Okay. Just give me like a thumbs up in the chat if you can. And so this is kind of what you would call the control centers, right? For the catapult. So for our example here, we can look at what we got going on. Hold on. Technical difficulties on my side, nobody else's, right? So in this type of example, and I'm just going to kind of talk through it while I show you this. And if we were trying to do something like a hot rolling process for aluminum manufacturing, and our target hardness, right, is 214 Bernal. We look at that 214 at the top there that you can see. So that's the target distance, right? So that's what we're looking at as far as our target. We always know, right, there's going to be some sort of level of issue or variance or something like that. We have to decide what level of variance from our data we're willing to accept. So our control range is going to be plus or minus 8.5. And that's what you see kind of in that section, right? So with that, we know there's going to be some level of statistic variation, statistic drifting. So for this example, we look at the inputs, and that's going to be the release angle is going to represent the rolling temperature, the firing force is going to represent something like the rolling pressure, all of those different pieces on the side. And the distance the projectile travels is represented by the hardness of the aluminum, right? So now imagine in this situation, I'm the operator, and we go ahead and launch the shot. So you can see it launch right there, and it comes out as, I don't know if you guys are old, but I am old, right? At on the red here, right? So the 128. That's not what we're looking for. That's obviously way too low. So now you have to decide, do I increase the temperature? Do I increase the pressure? Do I change both? And most of these operators make adjustments based on experience as opposed to data driven. So this one we're launching is 161. So we're getting closer, right? So we're upping our pieces on that side. And we can see this all happening in the adjustment dashboard. Now, if we had already kind of set this up, we would know that it's going to get closer. So all of these shots here, we're looking at different variations on the adjustment factors, and we're getting closer. We're getting to 86.3. The reason we want you guys to see this is it takes configurations of the tool to get there, and it should be customized to your process, right? So now we're landing closer. We're getting to 91.5, right? And we're in kind of more of a still red range. And now we're a little too much on that side. So we're going to launch it again and see if we can get closer to the actual 214 we're looking at. Okay, we're in the green. So now we're at 209, right? So now we've got it all configured and it can start to just run. And it shows us over time how it's going to drift and adjust. So these reds, quote unquote, right, or the red range will still show up, but now it's launching in the green range because, like we just talked about in the questions, it's learning. So then it adjusts, and you're able to continually monitor the drift. And the important piece isn't that we're hitting the 214 temperature mark every single time. It's that the goal is we're keeping the process stable, right? Statistically stable over time. Less scrap, less downtime, less guesswork, all of that. And we're able to have all of this historical data to be captured in that. So we'll switch over to the other view of this, the AI piece of it. So you're able to see what the back end really looks like and how the AI piece of it is being monitored. So the processes on this side is going to show you the decision log, like how it made that decision. I think this part specifically is something that is so missed so many different times because we don't know the back end workings of, tier one agents because they don't want you to build your own. And so the issue here is we need to be able to have that recorded information of why the shot was missed, and what the action was taken to showcase how we essentially fixed the drift. So the map too is able to show you, like, within the process monitoring, you can see the blinking part because it's still shooting. It's continuing to move. And that little snake, as I like to call it, the controlled chart, right? So these are the two pieces that we need to monitor to see if we're in the green or the red. But you can see it moving and shooting in real time. And we're able to monitor that factor. So this is a kind of a cool piece that you're able to show in real time. And then it shows you the process capability assessment too, and the process metrics at the bottom, so that you're able to really understand, again, kind of the back end workings of the overall Catapult. But this is the reason why owning your own agents is so important, so you can control the logic on that side. When we kind of give away that control to a bigger vendor, then we're not able to monitor all of these different pieces. And so the agent uses the design of experiments to determine if the process is in control. And that's what we're really focusing on, is the process in the range that we need to be focused on. That's a big piece of that. So while this runs here and we watch our snake kind of squiggle across, I'm going to see if we have any questions in the chat. So let's see. At what point does the Catapult decide to self-correct? So it takes all of these data points from the actions that were required, right? So you can see all of those those different pieces in here, and it learns from that and self corrects. Now, I just want to be so clear that this still takes an operator on our end or some end, right, to help be able to do it. So the agent doesn't try everything, right? It reads the patterns of what happened. If the last 5 shots are all landed shots, it knows to increase the relative parameters and things like that, not decrease them. So, not change random ones is a big piece of that as well. It calculates really the average gap between where the shots landed and the shots need to land, right? Just like we talked about in those variation. And then it moves the most impactful dials to the right direction by the right amount. So that's kind of how it self corrects from a process side, but it also is going to need monitoring, right? The thing that you can kind of trust is this is your data. It's not on somebody else's platform. As when we build this, I always say your data is none of our business, right? Because it really is not. I would say you need to make sure your data is incredibly clean and hygienic and its own, and there's processes around making sure that that currency piece of your business is monitored. But it's certainly not something that that is going to be totally self-sufficient. It as I said, it doesn't read everything, right? Let's see. What kind of environments or operations benefit the most from this type of monitoring? So this is a predictive agent, right? And as we gave in this example, it's measuring hardness. Wow, say that 3 times fast, right? But a lot of times we could do hardness, we could do thickness, we could do temperature, we could do pressure, we could do product quality. Those are the types of things that we're targeting, right? And that's why every adjustment and every drift pattern is monitored in these types of different things. Um, at what point does the automation become an agent? So typically when an agent, which is a very good question, when an automation, which is something that is just manual, so an automation would be like I measure the temperature all the time, right? The automation becomes an agent once the agent makes a decision to change one of these variables, right? So once it makes that call to say, this was outside of the red and we need to move it back to the green, it takes that pattern and it does something about it as opposed to just reading the pattern out from an automation standpoint. So not someone's there testing the temperature manually of every single production line or anything like that. So that's a big piece of what at what point it becomes an agent, right? What we don't want to do is layer on too many different decisions on our agents, especially if we're in an environment where we don't use agents all the time, right? This is going to be a big piece of the journey of being able to implement it and what that looks like. So let's see. Who is responsible when an agent makes a bad call? The operator. The operator is responsible. That's why a lot of times when we talk about things like dark manufacturing, that doesn't mean that there's not an operator. Like there might not be an operator on site, but there is still someone that is overseeing the bigger piece of the technology. And that's a huge understanding, right? Let's see. How do you test an agent before deploying it on something that matters? I mean, there should be a ton of test case environments, right? And done on these types of things. So just like we don't release code into production without testing it, you don't just plug in an agent without testing it first, right? That's just basic maturity on the IT side, which a lot of times we don't have, and not something that we can manage too, which is not a bad thing. It's just about knowing that, right? So if you're not able to, sorry, there's an epic dog fight going on behind me. Our puppy gets super hyped when it comes to AI agents, and all of those different things. So that's when we really take a look at, are we making sure that we're going through something that's testing before we put anything into production, right? And that's really how this snake oil is being sold, is like, just plug it in, it's plug and play, right? You can see all of these different pieces, on that level, where we don't need to buy something that we don't understand how it works. That's just basic IT, pieces. So I'm going to unshare this and we'll go through your questions. We can always bring it back up if you want to see anything else on it. If you want to try it, you can always, DM me and we can get you up there trying it. It's a cool piece of technology that is absolutely a piece of what that looks like. I'm like, my camera is mirroring, so it's so weird and it's freaking me out. But and it's showing that my ears are wildly crooked. My sister used to make fun of me for that when I was little, and that my nostrils were different sizes. So now you all know my trauma. But these are such good questions. So let's keep rolling through them. What KPIs are important when measuring the decisions of agents? I think, a big piece of that is like, what KPIs are important to you? What are you as an organization trying to achieve with this agent? That's a big piece of it. I think defining that before you ever implement an agent is something that is so critical, because a lot of times we just want AI agents to have AI agents and that's it, right? And that's all that we really are concerned about is, do we have AI agents? Not do they work? Not do they make us more efficient? Not do our team have a good relationship with utilizing that piece of technology? And that's a big piece of that. I think for the Catapult specifically, if that's what you're asking, we're just looking at like, how do we consistently stay in control over the process? So things like process capability, standard deviation, variance reduction, all of those different things, drift. And then for the aluminum specific example, we're looking at like, how much bad product are we wasting? And that's why we've kind of talked about why operators are often kind of shutting down that line, because the wasting product is super expensive. So they'd rather be slow, waste less, make sure that the production capacity is correct. So that would be like scrap percentage. It would be like yield improvement, rework percentage. And then a lot of time, like, so if we're going to measure the effectiveness of the Catapult, right, we're going to look at like our scrap dropped from 6.8% to 3.9% or something like that, so that we can measure. And this is how much money we saved on that. So I always say, like, economic awareness around agents are so critical. I think downtime is a huge one, right? So unplanned downtime, even adjustment downtime, which we're talking about here in these operator examples. Meantime, or the time between interruptions, line stop frequency, like, are we really struggling with the temperature component, so we're shutting it down? I think a lot of times with Catapult, we see metrics and KPIs like, we reduced adjustment related downtime by 31% or something like that, right? And then I'd say adjustment efficiency is a big one, right? How quickly can you stabilize the process? You might have to shut it down, right? Or like adjust and stop it. But the number of adjustments are going to be a big piece of that. The time to return to control, the over adjustment frequency, manual intervention rate, like those are going to be big pieces. And then you're also going to have operator KPIs when it comes to these types of things. So not only like, how is the agent performing, how is the operator actually looking at these types of things? So like operator variance or training ramp time or decision consistency, shift to variation, all of those different pieces. And like, I'll give you an example. So like night shift performance aligned with day shift in 60 days. Because we kind of all know that night shift can be slower than day shift, right? And that's a big consideration when it comes to manufacturing. So that's a big piece. And then just knowledge transfer. Like what does that look like from those amazing production managers that have been here for 30 years? Not that they're going away, can't stress that enough, but we're giving them the support and we're using them as a data set, and be able to accelerate that kind of dependency on senior operators. So let's see. That's a very good question. And you got to define that beforehand. Let's see. What problems are agents genuinely bad at right now? Oh man, a lot of things. Um, Let me see. I don't have like a great example off the top of my head of what agents are genuinely bad at. Maybe you guys do. So I would say they are genuinely bad at collaborative agents are genuinely bad at prioritizing things. That's a big one. Generative agents are genuinely bad at output. Like some of them, I don't know if you've ever asked Claude to do, a blog or something like that, but it's a hot mess and it's not a great piece. But Claude's great for like very complex problems, right? So a lot of those different agents. I think when we want to measure something that's more human, like engagement rate or those types of different things, agents can be bad at that because they don't understand like the nuances, like not only the quantitative but the qualitative data. They're not great at ingesting that. So those are some of my examples, but we'd love to hear yours, of course. So should you even be talking about AI agents if you don't know what ROI it's bringing? No, absolutely not. But many do, right? And that's kind of back to our what does it mean for the cost of hype? I'm speaking on that's my keynote next week at the Global Women in Tech Conference is what does it mean when you buy hype? And you might as well just burn your money. But a lot of times, businesses are so focused on looking good to shareholders by bringing in agents that they have zero idea what they do and zero idea how much they cost. And it's so risky. We'll see a lot of that fallout in the next 12 months. Guarantee it. We're already seeing it, right? So let's see. How do organizations build trust in autonomous corrective systems? Well, that absolutely depends, right? So they first of all need to see it for what it is. It is a technology. It is not a person, right? It is a tool. It is not a person, right? So a lot of times they think that they can just release autonomous agents and let them go. I would say the thing about autonomous agents that are helpful is the businesses that are even eligible to be able to use them have already gone through a lot of the technical proficiencies of automation. They've gone through the basic and fundamentals of master data management. And once that knowledge comes, they're much less likely to be reckless with autonomous technology because they understand, right, the nuts and bolts of that. And so I think that's a piece of it is you build trust through doing the foundational work so you actually understand how the technology operates, right? Let's see. Agents are good at closed loop optimization and well defined targets in stable environments with fast feedback and clean data. Obviously, couldn't have said it better myself. Mic drop. We'll just end the live right now. So, how much of the AI agent market is actually autonomous versus um, clever automation branding? So you're asking like if you want to buy an autonomous agent. I mean, software, well, they'll sell you anything to make you buy it. They'll make you think it's, a unicorn just going to run down your shop floor and magically make all of the drones float, right? So we all know, right, that software sales is a made up thing. So your job is to figure out in your due diligence what the agent's going to do and what you want it to do. And you should have already, before you called any vendor, identified that in your process work. This process is ripe for automation or an agent, right? Temperature, hardness, speed, all measurement, all of those different pieces that an agent could lay over. Do we know exactly how it's going to work? Absolutely not. That's why we hire a vendor or build one, right? But it is if it sounds too good to be true, it is most definitely. Some of the things I hear that Copilot can do, I'm like, I'm sure it can do that, right? But do you want it to? Right? Who saw that case study about Copilot blackmailing its employees because the two employees were having an affair via Teams? Like, I'm sorry, you weirdo. Like, they were documenting it on Teams. So Copilot in this wild edge case found out about it and blackmailed the employee to say, like, if you get rid of me, I will tell everyone about your, wasting company time that's wildly inappropriate, which sounds like they should be told that anyway, right? Those You can make it do that, right? The system will do these types of crazy things if you push it there and you teach it those things, right? So I think that's the piece of that is understanding what you want it to do, versus any sort of weird marketing message that Salesforce is going to put out there, or Microsoft or SAP or Oracle or you name it, about whatever they got going on, right? Do you think companies are trying to remove humans from the loop too aggressively? I think that they see a lot of overhead on their human workers, right? So they want to be able to cut those costs. Um, and so I think a lot of times, especially bigger companies, the shareholders utilize that. So I don't think that they are removing humans too aggressively. What I think is happening is bloated, poorly run organizations are using AI or AI agents specifically as a scapegoat to lay off these mass layoffs, right? 30,000 people at, Deloitte or Microsoft or whoever, right, are saying we're moving towards AI and automation. I think it was last year that Accenture was like, yeah, we laid off 20,000 because we're going to be doing more AI and automations. Like, what have you been doing for the last 20 years? If that's what you're just going to start doing right now. But don't ask me to evaluate the business decisions of Accenture. So I think it's more of that narrative of we're using AI as a scapegoat to lay off a bunch of people that we couldn't afford in the first place. Right. So that's just bad business decisions and bad leadership. What's the worst decision this agent could make, and how bad would the consequence be? For the catapult? Well, I would say the worst it's going to do is make a lot of very bad production decisions when it comes to creating waste. But the issue with that is it's not going to keep going if it's still flagging in the red in the adjustment period. So there could be a lot of waste when you're configuring it, right? But that all should come in the testing environment. So it's a very low risk agent on that side. And again, it comes with an operator. So if the operator is just standing there, I don't know, asleep or something like that, and it's continuing to throw and it's in the red, there could absolutely be some wasted product involved in that. So that would be my piece of it. It's certainly not going to blackmail you for having an affair with your cohorts, which again, none of my business. Don't know, don't want to know, right? So, how do you compare the risk of agent error to the risk of human error at the same task? So I think again that this is a KPI that you would look at something like downtime or adjustment periods or things like that to make sure those are going down. It's not an apples to apples comparison. What it is you looking at your greater risk assessment and overall quality assurance of your product. So that would be how you would measure these KPIs. Are we getting faster, right? Are we reducing our waste? Are we increasing our efficiency? and are our employees happy, right? And that's going to be the main KPIs to focus on, not so much human versus machine, because that's not comparing two, it's two very different processes, right? So I could compare my house to a mansion in Beverly Hills. It's not really a comparison, right? Some people would like my house better. Some people would like the mansion in Beverly Hills. You tell me, right? So, how much existing infrastructure needs to change to support an agent? I mean, pretty significant in the infrastructure if you don't have a technology mature organization, right? If we don't have data management discipline, right, that's going to be a huge change for you. And you're going to need to make sure that that's a consistent journey moving forward. If we don't have the ability to utilize connectivity and integration in our manufacturing process, then we're probably going to need a pretty big infrastructure change. When it comes to the infrastructure of like the organizational design, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to move an operator, right, that's not really used to continuing to use technology to use these types of things, that's used to, like, listening to the machine and then kicking it on the left side. We're going to have to make sure that employee has a good transition from being able to do that to now utilizing an agent that they're going to need to change variations, that they're going to need to monitor from a technology standpoint. And that might be a big infrastructure change. That totally depends on your company culture, right? And that's going to be a big piece of that too. You're going to need to make sure that the agent is explained right, or so people don't think, oh, I just don't even need to pay attention to it anymore. No, it's like a junior untrained employee, right? It might do really well once it's configured right, but it still needs to be monitored for that change. So that's a definitely something that you're going to want to make sure that you go through as an organization before, right, anybody has the ability to influence that from a vendor standpoint of being like, yeah, you can cut all this headcount, you can do all these different things. Could you do that? Yeah, but not without a massive amount of disruption. Because even if you cut, say you're just doing this on the night shift and you're going to do a little pilot in one area and you cut 3 jobs because you think it's going to save you, that creates this, ripple effect throughout the organization of people now not focusing on doing really good work. They're now focused on, am I going to get fired or am I going to have my job? And they certainly don't want to engage with this technology that took other jobs and now it might take their job, right? That's not a situation in which we want to create, because then we're not at all focused on getting product out the door. We're more focused on people's livelihood and a very vulnerable, anxiety driven culture, right? We don't want that on the shop floor in any way, shape, or form. So great. Well, so this was again our Catapult agent. I hope you enjoyed kind of going through this with me today. I think the more that we talk about the agents that we have in the marketplace right now that are doing good work, that are secure, right? That are your company owned, and that are not, taking advantage of you by locking you into a core offering and then charging you per usage or AI tax or anything like that. That's kind of what I want for you guys, is you to be able to just control your environment. If you think that you want to utilize all of the agents in Oracle's HCM system, that's awesome. If that works for you and that's good for you, that's great. What I'm asking you to do is just evaluate it on your terms before anybody else is getting in there to sell you something. And then you're then locked into a 3-year contract. Many of the clients that come to us are like, I hate this system. I made a mistake. But we're in it for 3 years. So there's not a lot you can do in those situations. I want to catch you before you get to that point, right? Before you're in a situation where you can't get out of, especially when it comes to being this hot thing right now for AI agents. And how that really works. So that's kind of our demo for today. Just a reminder, I go live every Tuesday and Thursday on TikTok. If you liked this live and you want to share it, I always appreciate kind of just getting our word out. I give all of this advice for free. I show you these demos for free because I feel like it's something you deserve to know and not gatekept by big SaaS or big software that profit off your confusion. So that piece of it is always helpful. DM me with any additional questions or feedback, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thanks so much. Bye bye.